David the android is awakened and put through numerous duties that demand mental and physical coordination by his inventor many years before humans went to explore the cosmos. David notes that although he was formed by a human, humans do not know who created them, and if he ever learns who created him, it is likely that his creator will have passed away by then. After the Prometheus mission, 11 years have passed, and the year is now 2104. Over 2,000 people in cryosleep and over 1,000 human embryos are going to the planet Origis 6 on the colony starship Covenant. The spacecraft is operated by an AI named Mother and the android Walter, an upgraded version of David, while the humans are asleep. 7 years remain until a neutrino bombardment from a nearby stellar ignition unexpectedly strikes the spacecraft, inflicting significant damage, igniting multiple flames on board, and cutting off power. 15 crew members are awakened to cope with the issue as the ship starts to shake and Walter does his best to put out the fires. However, the crew is unable to wake up the captain in time, and his wife Daniels is forced to watch it burn when the captain's pod falls and becomes stuck. Despite losing 47 colonists and 16 embryos, the remaining crew is able to put out the fire. Daniels pauses to cry and look over her husband's belongings while the gang salvages the body. First Officer Orem assumes command of the ship in the meantime and directs the crew to focus on fixing all of the damage. Some of them gripe that they need time to gather their thoughts following the defeat, but Orem reminds out that if they don't get things fixed right now, they'll lose even more lives. Daniels tells Walter about the cabin her late husband planned to construct while they are working together, and Walter urges her to carry out his wish in his honor. The crew then raises a glass in honor of their late commander and launches his body into space. The ship's power system is immediately fixed when pilot Tennessee performs a spacewalk to continue with the external repairs while being cautious to reconnect all of the sails. The ship's communications are unaffected, but he is startled to receive a broadcast that is warped and fractured. Tennessee quickly takes his helmet to be examined, and they hear a strange sound that they eventually recognize as Country Roads by John Denver. When they follow the errant communication to its source, they discover that it came from a nearby planet that is even more suitable for human life than Origis 6 was predicted to be. Orem thinks they would settle there because it appears to be a decent house that won't take them 7 years and nobody was going to go back to sleep after the deaths anyhow. In a private conversation, Daniels expresses her concerns about traveling to a region they are unfamiliar with and receiving a scary signal, but Orem doesn't see a problem and sticks with his idea. A few days later, when they arrive on the planet, Tennessee, Rix, and Upworth remain in orbit with the Covenant, while the rest of the crew uses a shuttle to descend to the planet's surface. Fortunately, they pass through unharmed and successfully land despite traveling through a violent environment that causes the entire shuttle to tremble and cause them to lose touch with the Covenant. While the others departed to investigate the area, Maggie remained in the shuttle to work on re-establishing communication with the Covenant. They discover a globe filled with lush flora and breathable air, but they are unable to detect any animal life at all. They are further startled to see wheat growing within, which is clearly human-cultivated despite being centuries old. Ledward remains with Corinne to keep an eye on her as she stops to collect some samples during their exploration. Ledward unintentionally treads on some small pods while taking a smoke break while Corinne is at work, which allows microscopic germs to enter his ear undetected. The crew continues on and comes upon a number of downed trees, which makes them question what could have been so large to inflict such devastation. They locate a massive engineer spacecraft that has crashed farther away, so they go inside to look for answers. Since it's so dark in there and Hallett finds more of those little pods, he unintentionally breathes in the germs as well. As they go, the squad discovers unsettling sculptures of an alien species, along with military tags and a photograph of Dr. Shaw from the disappearing Prometheus. They are farther inside when they unintentionally touch a sphere that turns on the ship's main system and reveals that the signal they heard originated there. Ledward suddenly feels queasy. He initially believes it's simply a headache, but as it gradually worsens by the second, Corinne tells the others that they need to return. At that point, Hallett starts to feel ill as well as the squad chooses to imitate her. Ledward accidentally vomits up blood on Corinne as they are being dragged back to the shuttle by him. When Maggie pulls off Ledward's clothing to take him to the medbay with her, a cut on his back erupts and blood shoots all over her face. Ledward starts having a seizure as Maggie exits and locks the door out of fear that this may be contagious. Ledward's corpse begins to split open as two pointed ends emerge from his back, revealing a pale neomorph monster. Corinne is the next to be attacked by the neomorph, and despite her attempts to fight herself, She is shortly killed since Maggie won't open the door. Maggie tries to kill the thing after becoming terrified and hunting for a weapon, but she is unsuccessful, so she flees. Maggie is unable to hit the neomorph because of how quickly she is going towards her after breaking the window. Maggie is killed and the ship is destroyed after a stray bullet strikes many combustible tanks, but the neomorph is able to flee. As soon as the squad gets there, they see their friends passing and are horrified. Hallett continues to feel worse, and then all of a sudden, a second neomorph emerges from his mouth, which flees away fast. Tennessee, who is concerned about the team's lack of contact, wants to check on them, but Upworth tells him it would be wiser to wait for assurance that they are safe. The neomorphs reappear a short while later, having considerably grown bigger. They aggressively attack the squad, killing a few people as they miss their shots. Walter intervenes and sacrifices his hand to rescue Daniels when he himself almost perishes. The crew eventually kills one of the neomorphs after firing several bullets in the dark and suffering from injured troops. The second neomorph flees as a cloaked man emerges out of nowhere and fires a flare. Following the figure's request, the group enters an old city's ruins and is startled to see the bones of its former residents. The person emerges as David, who came here 10 years ago following his escape from Prometheus with Dr. Shaw. They then enter a temple filled with enormous statue heads. When they arrive, the ship's payload of weaponized black liquid rained over the metropolis, wiping out all flora and infecting the whole world. Following the ship's collision, Shaw was killed and David was left alone. He tells them that nobody is sick in the temple because if they were, they would already be experiencing the consequences. The crew members head to the roof to try to contact the Covenant after informing David of their goal, but the storm prevents them from doing so. Tennessee commands Ricks and Upworth to fly through the storm to save the squad, despite their objections, back on the ship. Orem apologies for not listening to Daniels in the meantime, but she continues to support his viewpoint. Before departing to trim Walter's hair, David addresses him as brother. Walter explores the chambers of an older model since he is fascinated about it, and finds a ton of sketches and instruments within. When David sees him inspecting some homemade flutes, he decides to teach him how to play them. The new models, like Walter, were created without the ability to create because David had been such a renegade. After that, David leads Walter outdoors, where he starts to recall the day he arrived. In contrast to what he had previously told the others, the black liquid hadn't dropped by chance. He deliberately let it out, then watched in disbelief as the whole population of the area was wiped off in a matter of seconds. After citing in Ozymandias' passage attributed to Byron, David shows her Walter Shaw's tomb and tells her he loved her. Because they are androids, Walter doesn't trust him and claims David is conflating duty with love. A little while later, the fully grown neomorph enters the temple secretly and materializes in front of a crew member. She attempts to grab her rifle, but the neomorph is quicker and shoots her dead. David discovers the neomorph feasting on the body and is able to have a pleasant conversation with it while the Covenant shakily passes the storm and eventually makes contact with the squad. David becomes enraged when Orem interferes and shoots the neomorph right away. When Orem notices this peculiar response, he demands to know the situation's true circumstances. David takes him to a lab where he demonstrates his attempts to genetically modify the organisms produced by the black liquid into a greater life form. Then he guides Orem into a room located in the temple's basement, where numerous of his creation's eggs are kept. Orem looks closer when David assures him it is completely safe, but as soon as the egg opens, a facehugger leaps out to assault and impregnate him. The crew discovers they are missing members as they prepare to depart. After discovering their friend's body, they make the decision that they must find Orem right now. After telling Orem that creation is his aim and his religion, David observes as another alien explodes from Orem's chest, killing him instantaneously. David forms a relationship with the child and is pleased with his own creative abilities. When Walter searches for Orem, he also discovers Shaw's dismembered body, which David had utilized as raw material for his growing monster creations. Walter finds David sobbing while playing the flute in Shaw's memory when he goes to confront him. David claims that because people are a dying species clinging to life and not meant to serve, they don't deserve to survive. Walter argues that David was mistaken about the poem's creator, presenting it as evidence that he isn't quite sane and shouldn't be believed. David assures Walter that no one would ever love him as much as he does, and then kisses him because he is still convinced that his creatures are the ideal organisms. But this is really a cover for an attack on Walter to take him out. While continuing searching for Orem, Lope and Cole come under attack from the facehugger, who leaps on Lope's face and burns it. Cole uses his knife to kill the facehugger, but a protomorph takes advantage of the diversion to leap on Cole and kill him as Lope flees. Daniels discovers a hidden area with illustrations that reveal the truth about David's unsettling experiments. David tackles her after surprising her from behind, starting a battle in which he tries to take advantage of her. When Walter arrives to assist, Daniels pushes him away when he tries to kiss her. Both androids engage in a heated combat since their skill and speed are equal. David questions Walter's ability to actually prefer anyone over his own brother. Daniels flees and eventually encounters Lope. The two of them leave the temple together and send a signal to the Covenant to indicate where they are. The protomorph quickly pursues the three of them as they race for the landing craft once Walter has joined them. As they board the ship and shut the door, Walter informs them that he has slain David. However, when they emerge, they find the protomorph has leapt aboard the Covenant as well. Daniel steps outside while maintaining a rope attachment to the spacecraft, then she starts firing at the alien. The protomorph deflects her blows and starts smashing the front window, but Tennessee causes the spacecraft to make some wild rolls, causing the monster to tumble to the side, allowing Daniels the opportunity to engage it head-on and eventually dispatch it with the help of the ship's remote crane. Tennessee reacts swiftly and prevents the Covenant from crashing during the procedure, allowing them to depart the planet at last. Later, Upworth assists Lope in receiving burn treatment, while Daniels assists Walter in having his face repaired. The team prepares to enter cryosleep again and complete the last 7 years of their original journey once everyone has recovered. Tennessee explains to Daniels that she is now the captain, and the two of them embrace to share their sorrow for the loss of their loved ones. The spacecraft is suddenly surrounded by an alert signaling the presence of an unknown life type. Lope is discovered dead on the floor in the medical facility by Daniels and Tennessee after a second protomorph burst from his chest. Meanwhile, Rix and Upworth are enjoying themselves in the shower when the protomorph enters and promptly murders them. Daniels decides she wants to fight on her terms when she and Tennessee search for the alien and discover the dead in the shower. She instructs Walter to lock the doors so she may entice the beast into the space with the terraforming facility, where a new, ferocious battle breaks out. When Walter opens the car doors as Daniels commands, the protomorph is trapped within, and the decompression that results sends everything into space. But when the protomorph escapes and tries to attack Daniels, she remains still to serve as bait for another truck to crash into the protomorph and knock it out of the Covenant. Tennessee briefly believes Daniels was also dismissed, but it turns out that she is alright since she stood her ground. The next step is to transition into cryosleep. When Daniels enters Tennessee's pod as the first to move, she reminds Walter of the cabin they had promised to build. When the android fails to identify the promise, Daniels discovers that it is actually David, not Walter, who had impersonated Walter by cutting off his hand and leaving a scar on his face. David triggers Daniels' pod, putting her into cryosleep, and then he moves on to the next part of his plan while she calls out in vain. Along with the colonists, he enters the cryosleep facility and regurgitates 2 tiny, solidified facehugger embryos, placing them in the cold storage compartment next to the human ones. Then he enters a journal under the name Walter indicating that the ship is still heading for Origi 6 and that all crew members, aside from Tennessee and Daniels, were dead in the disaster from the start.